Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of Real Hawk Talk of the evening. I'm Brian Nehmauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at HawkBlogger. Hopefully, somebody out there can tell us if our audio is actually working this time. Because if it's not, we'll have to come up with another solution altogether. I don't know how many more opportunities we're going to have to restart this stream, but it's up to the internet gods. Um, People are saying it's better, so we're going to keep going. That's great to hear. Fantastic. All right. So, what I was saying that nobody could hear before was this is a really kind of a weird deal. On one hand, you have got a first place Seattle Seahawks team, a chance to basically send your most bitter rival into oblivion by beating them and sending them to 0-3 in the NFC West, sending them off to Kansas City to likely go 2-5 if they were to lose this one. You've got your two edge players, your young edge players, Boye Mafe, Derek Hall, looking like they're going to play. One of them, Boye Mafe's had a sack in every game. The other, Derek Hall, has 5 sacks. He's on track for 17 sacks in the season. You've got Kenneth Walker as the number 1 rated running back by Pro Football Focus. You have Gino Smith having one of his best years of his career. And yet, and it's throwback night. We're going to be wearing throwback jerseys. There's never a better time to watch the Seahawks when they're wearing throwback jerseys. But yet, the overall tenor of Seahawks fans that I get is this, oh man, I don't want to see this. Like, to the point of, I'm wondering how many people are going to be wearing Seahawks jerseys in that stadium on Thursday. Let me bring in the fellas. Nathan Ernst at NathanE11, Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons. Nathan, you've already told me, but let tell the people again. What's your vibe here? Like, how are you feeling about this game?
Yeah, I said a lot of really smart and witty things earlier, but no, yeah, I I'm not looking forward to this. I'm not excited that this is a primetime game. You know, the way that they showed up on Monday Night Football, the way that they played against the Giants, now to have this big national primetime game and potentially to see them just get completely ran over again is terrifying. But there is a part of me that has hope too. And so it's like it's a little bit of watching the horror movie, like you're kind of doing the like this thing, like I don't know. Yeah, so I'm really nervous, and I wish not everyone would have been watching us tomorrow night.
Jeff, I think I know your answer, but what's your status?
I'm still recovering from Sunday, and the more
Mm-hmm.
I've dug into the game, like some of the field goals guys and Griff, and the more they've pointed out, it's not been fun to going over reason not only what happened but why it happened. But then I watched your show with Grant, and then all of a sudden I kind of felt a little bit better, and I'm like, holy crap, things are pretty ugly over there. And then I saw Tim Kawakami pick Seattle, and even Lombardi, who's like Mister, like every other team sucks. I think we had him as a 3-point game. And so I'm starting to think maybe this would be fun, but honestly, if I probably had to answer the question, I'm certainly in Nathan's camp. Like, the more I think about this game, like, it doesn't feel good.
So I think what we should do in this show, because I think that there is no shortage of there's no shortage of information out there and vibes out there about why the Seahawks are probably going to lose this game. Like, there's that is the dominant feeling out there. I'm not saying everybody feels that way, but that's the dominant feeling. So I want to start with, let's talk about some legitimate paths to the Seahawks winning this game. And one of the things I'll ask you, Jeff, when I look at these two teams, for the past 3 years, I have approached these games as you need some sort of hand of God to enter the stadium to win. Like it felt like not even college versus pros. It felt like high school versus pros. Like it just like the trenches just didn't feel close. I don't feel that way with these two teams. I don't feel like the difference between these two teams is anywhere close to as much as it was the last couple years. Tell me if you feel that way.
Yeah, I was at that game with you last November in the Thanksgiving game, and just going in, I knew we were going to get smoked, and just the talent disparity felt huge. And it does feel like, and I've been saying this all year, a lot of the familiar names are there in San Francisco, but the more you dig on them, it's not the same team. They're not a juggernaut. They have not looked. They would have not lost some of those games. And I think, Brian, you tweeted out today, take a look at their defensive tackle lineup and compare it to where they were when they were peaking. They had DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead, and last year they brought in Hargrave, and it was just like an embarrassment of riches. And look, they still have Bosa and they still have Trent Williams, probably the two best players in the game, and they still have Fred Warner. But some of the areas where they just look dominant to like really make this just such a blowout, where's that defensive tackle group? And then their cornerback group is banged up. We don't even know if their top corner is going to play. So there are some advantages that Seattle has here that just haven't been there. Like Charvarius Ward has really given DK Metcalf trouble other than that playoff game where he beat him over the top. But I look at that defensive tackle group and I look at some of the numbers you've tweeted out, Brian, about how they've struggled to defend the run in base situations. And we were very skeptical about their run defense based on the personnel they added in the offseason, who they lost. And the numbers have not looked good. They've been run over in heavy sets. And when they've run with like big sets and what Seattle should do in this game, you can tell there's a legitimate fear about Kenneth Walker out in San Francisco. And I don't know if the Seattle O-line could hold up in this kind of game, but it doesn't feel like, you're right, it doesn't feel like there's a massive talent disparity like it has in the past. The areas I'm worried about are more based on what Shanahan could do with our weakness. But in terms of like the trench battles and like, yeah, we might see Nick Bosa against Stone Forsythe, but I think if Seattle can hold up in the run game up front, I think there's a legitimate area they can attack and attack pretty consistently.
Nathan, out of 100 times, how many times do you think the Seahawks win this game? They play this game 100 times. How many times do they win?
It's so hard to say. Like right now, I want to say like 25 or 30 times maybe. But it's been such a like. There's been 2 chapters to the season, and the first chapter was awfully good, and the second chapter has been incredibly bad. And I don't know where the team really is. Like, are they really what we've seen the last 2 weeks? I'm nervous that maybe the answer is yes. But I don't think you look as good as they did early in the year, and not have any of that be real. So yeah, like it just feels like a team that's trying to find itself, and I don't know who's going to show up. If we get anything that looks like the last 2 weeks, it's a lot less than 25 times that they win. And if they get anything that looks like the first couple of weeks, then it, maybe you're starting to get more into like a 60-40 or even 50-50 type game.
I wonder a bit how much of this feeling that we've got is based off of the 49ers that we've seen over the past few years versus what you've seen this year. How much of the 49ers have you guys watched this year?
A lot.
And tell me, Jeff, if you'd never seen them play before, you had no history of them before, try as best you can to kind of separate that out. How would you describe this year's 49ers team?
They're a lot like some of the Seahawks teams with Russ, kind of in the second half of that, like the 2015 to 2019, where like Brock Purdy's really kind of playing off script. He's holding on to the ball longer. He's really kind of masking a lot. Defensively, they have a lot of the names. Again, we're familiar with. Fred Warner has been outstanding. But they're kind of flawed. And like teams have run all over them. And they're not that like trench warriors. Like week 1, they looked awesome. And like it was like, oh God, we got no shot. But the last 4 weeks, they look kind of like those Seahawks teams in like the post 2015 era where, again, you look on paper, like the 2016 Seahawks, like they had some really fun games, but they lost some games and they can get pushed around. So the talent's there, but like I've been comparing them all year, and I heard you compare it on your show yesterday, Brian, which brought me a big smile. I see the 2015 Seahawks. I see striking similarities. And I can go through them. I don't know if you want to now, but like it's pretty shocking how similar they are to the 2015 Seahawks.
Yeah, I think we've covered that a little bit, so I don't know if we need to go through all the details, but I think it's good enough to talk about. Yes, this is a team that's in transition from being rough and tough to being more Brock Purdy quarterback centric. And that doesn't mean that they lack, like the 2015 Seahawks still had Cam Chancellor and still had these players, but the identity was shifting and it wasn't as much the same team as it had been. And the offense feels odd to me that it is very productive. Like Purdy looks more dangerous than he has in past years, but it also seems less reliable and less able to finish the goal, finish the task. Like and that's shown up in the red zone. I think that's even an overrated way to look at it. I just think that the offense seems to stall out in some of these situations, and it goes over the course of quarters and halves. So, like anytime you have your quarterback taking 3.15 seconds on average to throw the ball, things are not exactly like clicking. Like, I don't care about it. Like, you do not want your quarterback on average taking that long to throw. So, Nathan, I mean, when you look at the 49ers and you look at them as a team that, has some advantages, where do you see their biggest advantage relative to the Seahawks? Like, it's been they're going to run the ball down your throats, or it's been, whatever. There's a million. But what do you feel like is their biggest advantage for this year?
It's the thing that we've been worrying about since the start of the year, since free agency. How are these linebackers going to hold up against a Shanahan passing attack and the middle of the field and the play action and all that kind of stuff, right? And it's Shanahan, it's McVay. I mean, there's a lot of these guys out here, but you've got two of the best in the division, and you have what looks to be kind of a glaring weak spot at the place that they love to attack, and they love to put those dudes in blenders. And we've got linebackers that put themselves in blenders. They don't need a lot of help sometimes. So that, I mean, is the most glaring thing. And Griff had the stats on this about how good the Niners are at it and how bad Seattle has been at it. And so, yeah, like that's I think that's really the game. Like, if Seattle can't slow that down a little bit, you don't need them to stop it, right? Like, if you can play offense against this team like they did against the Lions, then you just need the defense to be a little bit alive, and maybe you can eke it out. But that'll be the I think that's what the whole game hinges on.
I was wondering about this. Like, when I've watched the 49ers this season, I don't think that they or the people that would watch them say, okay, they need to do this differently. Like, they need to approach something differently. There's just like, it's like missing a beat. They're just like not quite keeping the engine running on both sides of the ball. There's some real flaws. We'll talk about that in a second. But the reason I bring that up is I think their mentality going into this is not, okay, we need to show Seattle something that we haven't shown them. I think their mentality going into this game is, we got to get back to 49ers football. We just need to be us. And you're hearing them in the press do things like, this is a must-win game. And you're John Lynch talking about it in the press as a must-win. Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, like, I think you generally do that when you feel like all that you need to win a game is to show up and be yourself. Like, you have to feel pretty confident in yourself to kind of, because if you don't win, what do you say? Right?
Yeah.
So the reason I bring up this juxtaposition is Mike Macdonald. I asked him, he's not, I mean, he says every game's a must win, it's kind of whatever. But I also asked him, I was like, hey, you guys have had trouble in the run when you have a light box. You actually, though, I didn't know this until today when I looked it up. When they have just a standard box, 7 guys on the field, 7 guys in the box, they're a top 4 run defense in the NFL. And so I said that to him, and I was like, you have a short week. How much do you change? How much do you emphasize like what you're good at versus try to change things up? And here's what he said. All right. I'm going to get this up there for everybody. Hopefully you guys can hear this. You looking to change what you're doing versus, just lean into what you're good at?
Both. Great. I love that. It's a great question.
Okay, let's pause there for a second. Okay.
Both is the short answer. A little bit of, hey, what do we expect the 49ers to do and how they attack us? How well do we identify the change-ups and how they're operating? And then how well our guys are playing the different structures. And so those are all things that you're doing every game. That we were able to make adjustments last game, not so much the Detroit game, and we're just chasing that. So right now we got to come out. We want to have a ton of energy, be focused. Let's go fly around, and go be us, and then to kind of let the chips fall from there.
Curious what you guys make of that, Nathan. What's your response to that?
It's not a both is such a weird answer to me.
Okay. Why is that?
Because they're like polar opposite options. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how do you lean into what you're good at? And I mean, it's not, I don't know. It just feels a little not scattershot.
Wishy-washy?
Yeah, either kind of wishy-washy. Maybe he was just, given an answer for the press or whatever. But also, it feels like something where maybe you need to kind of have a little bit more conviction and pick a direction a little bit more, especially on a short week and everything. And to say both, it just sits a little weird with. I don't know if I can quite put my finger on it, but I guess maybe a little bit of it too is like he's a really smart dude. And so for him, I think he wants to maybe draw up a perfect game plan. But you got like 3 days and your defense sucks. Like, pick something.
All right. I've got a different reaction, but I want to hear your thoughts, Jeff. What was your reaction to that?
Well, his answer's a lot better than what he said to Bob last week. So I'd say that's a big improvement. So I really struggled with that one after watching the game Sunday. I remember on our Saturday show, I'm like, it's probably nothing burger. And then I watched the game, I'm like, oh, maybe there was something there. So yeah, it's a little wishy-washy, but I get with what he's saying. Like, sure, he wants to defend and base better and also wants to change what's not working. But yeah, it's hard to really know. Like it's not strategically smart to just like kind of admit what you want to do in the public. So he's probably just given kind of a crappy answer because he's not going to tell you what he's going to do. So
so some of this I will give you my reaction is based off of the way we've interacted over the course of the last few months and how this felt a little different. He was excited by this question for a couple reasons, and I'm not saying that to pat myself. I just like his mindset. He was excited because there's a few different things that are kind of an option. One, they do play 7 guys in the box. It's not like they haven't done that. So it's not like they'd have to install something to play in, just conventional box numbers. So they could simply just increase the percentage of times that they play 7 guys in the box. They could do that. That would they won't need any practice time to do that. They could just call those plays more often. They could say, well, we actually are going to play some different fronts in our light box situation. We could go to bare fronts more often than we have, which will potentially spill out runs to different gaps and have the linebackers have to cover different gaps than what they have before. I think I heard a little bit of that they're like, they might look at some different ideas within their light box because the light box for them is pretty fundamental to how they work. So they're not giving up on light box. Like, you hear Robert Mays, you hear Deontay Lee, they're like, just mail it until next year. You can't do it. Like, you don't have the guys to do it. Don't do it anymore. I hear him saying not yet on that. And for some people, that might be like, come on, dude, just give up on it. For me, I don't know if you guys watched some of the film. We watched it with Big Ray this morning. But I left that game feeling like the Seahawks were mauled physically. And when you watch a lot of the tape, it wasn't as much that. It was linebackers and safeties filling the wrong gaps, and run fits were off. And I'm much more hopeful that can be corrected or at least improved, and that was maybe the worst kind of view of it. And so I thought it was interesting to hear that he's also thinking about, well, also what do the 49ers do? And how do we, what do we do that might fit their type of run game that's different than some of these other run games? So I heard in his answer encouragement, something in his, he feels like there's a menu of things that he wants to try in this game. They'll see how it's going and adjust. But I got the feeling he feels good. I also asked him if he's going to play Tyrese Knight more often, because I thought maybe they'd say, hey, one of these linebackers needs to feel some competition. And he's like, no, Tyrese is a backup. So I don't know, man. I left there feeling a little bit more like, okay, Mike's not feeling trepidatious the way we are about this. Maybe that's a nothing burger, but that stuck out to me in this conversation with him.
He definitely had a different energy answering the question, whatever the answer is. And he's not going to divulge state secrets in a press conference. So the answer is probably secondary, but I definitely picked up on the same thing that you're saying, that maybe it's just because somebody was asking about something that wasn't injuries, but he perked up for sure.
What do you think the Seahawks' biggest advantage is in this game? If you were to pick, you each only get to pick one, and you can't pick the same one.
Do they have two advantages? Can we do that?
Oh,
do they?
That's a fair question. If you think it's that small, then you start, Nathan.
No.
Jeff, do you have one teed up?
I think if they could
draw.
I think if they can run the ball in heavy formations, and I don't know if the offensive line could hold up, but San Francisco, we said it from the jump of their offseason. They're not built to defend the run well. And Leonard Floyd and then their defensive tackles are thin. And Brian, you put out the numbers today when they struggle the most. It's out of heavy formations trying to defend the run. I don't know if Seattle has a great heavy formation but they have blocking tight ends. So they have some guards who can at least run block. And they seem pretty fearful of Kenneth Walker. Lombardi's talked about it. Some of the other repeat reporters have talked about it, that they're all going into this game expecting Kenneth Walker to, and then Ryan Grubb comes out and basically says yeah, I screwed up last week. So the numbers indicate that they have a chance if they don't stink up front, which is obviously not something they can rely on because they do stink up front. But if they can run the ball out of that heavy formation, Kenneth Walker is not an easy guy to tackle, and they don't have the horses to tackle him at the defensive tackle level and win those battles. And they don't have a great second linebacker, and their safeties have been shit, and their best safety is injured. So there are opportunities out there.
You hit a lot, Jeff. Let me ask you follow up here. Who's got the better run defense, the Detroit Lions or the San Francisco 49ers?
The Detroit Lions.
It's not even close. Not even close. By any metric, the Detroit Lions have a better run defense. How many yards did the Seahawks run for against the Lions? I'll tell you. 133.
Yeah.
And what was the previous high that the Detroit Lions had given up prior to that? It was 80.
Yeah, it was like 74 or something. Yeah.
Something like that. We just saw not that long ago, as much as we're freaking annoyed about the defense, that was an explosive run game that was finding some ways to do things. The Seahawks rank number 4 in the NFL in power success rate. When they bring extra guys to a side, the 49ers are a bottom 5 defense in defending that. They are a bottom 5 defense when they have to bring 8+ guys into the box, because they really only have Fred Warner and Nick Bosa as legitimate like run defenders. If you have all those extra blockers, you can take some of those guys out. So I think it's absolutely fair to say the Seahawks have a real advantage, or have the potential to have a really big advantage in the run game.
And that's super important. Like, you know, they had that huge advantage in the running game against the Lions, and they lost by 13. So running matters for sure. It's going to be huge for them.
Well, they couldn't defend the run. Maybe running did matter in that game.
Well, that's true. I mean, that's actually fair. Like, but like, why is that going to be different against the Niners? Like, I want to get excited and I want to be with you, but like, we're pumping up like, oh, the running game. And I'm like, well, I don't know. And they're like, but look at the Lions game. They lost by 13. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's no game where if you give up touchdowns on every possession that you're gonna do well, regardless. Like, so I think that is a poor example to choose.
But what if, I guess, like, this is the thing, you know, we keep talking about the Niners, and yeah, they look very vulnerable this year. They just lost to the Giants. They just lost to Daniel Jones. Like, who cares who's on the other side of the ball? Can this team beat anyone right now? Because we thought the Giants were a gimme, even with all the problems they had against Detroit. And so this is the thing that, like, that's hard for me right now. Like, how do I evaluate any game when they just went out and lost to the Giants? And that was off of a game where they needed to come out and show they had a backbone, right? And they needed to come out and they needed to wash the taste of that Lions game out of their mouth, and they just pooped their pants big time.
Yeah, there's no argument there. Like, I mean, we wrote about it, we talked about it. Like, there is no defense of that game, period. And there was no defense in that game.
Yeah.
I'll tell you though, total honesty, as much as I was so frustrated by what I saw, I've seen plenty of times in the NFL where the difference between one game to the next, you're like, wait, how is this even possible? Almost to the point of being annoying. Mm-hmm. How can they be playing better defense against the 49ers than they did against the Giants? Like, that would not shock me at all if they come out there and they look better against the 49ers than they do against the Giants.
It would be hard to
this far. I think that there is a higher probability that the Seahawks will be better on defense against the 49ers than that they'll be as bad as they were against the Giants and the Lions. Doesn't mean that they're going to shut them out or hold them to 10 points, but that they will be closer to a competitive defense in this game. I think that that's probable in this one. Don't know if it's going to be enough. Well, but I think it's probable.
The Cardinals are a pretty horrible defense. And even with the Seahawks injuries, the Cardinals probably have worse personnel. And they essentially shut out the Niners in the second half. And there was a fumble in the red zone, but they blocked a kick for a touchdown. And I think they only scored 13 points in the game. But again, I think the mentality of this game is going to be very different than playing Arizona, who just came off a 41-14 game. And it seemed like they kind of overlooked them as well. But yeah, if you play as bad as you did last week on defense, they're going to lose the game. And I get to the same place Nathan does. But yeah, I think there's reason to hope they'll be a little bit better. Especially, I think having Mafe alone will help. But there's a lot of injury concerns. They're beaten up, and if you really look at the matchup and the linebacker gap issues and their run gap issues, I don't know if 4 days with no practices, it's like, oh, they're going to get a lot better at defending the run gaps when they were completely outgapped all day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's no, I could make arguments that there is reason to expect that the more time that Jerome Baker and Tyrell Dodson get to play together, the more time they get in meetings, the better they're going to communicate, the more that they're going to be in the right place. But it is absolutely fair to just be like, yeah, not going to be good enough. And here's the thing. This isn't about can the Seahawks defend the 49ers for 4 quarters? Of course, that would be great. The 49ers, to your point, Jeff, they are a hot and cold team. And if you look at their offense in the first half, they are 16 points a game, which is 4th in the NFL. You look at their points in the second half, they are 9 points a game, which is 22nd in the NFL. I think a huge part of this game is going to be the 49ers coming out trying to knock the Seahawks out in the first quarter or two. Just take their souls. If the Seahawks manage to stay on their feet in the first half of this game, if they get to halftime and it's a close game, the Seahawks have been a second half team. They're the exact opposite of the 49ers, which is one of the things that's hard, but they're a top 10 team in second half scoring.
We'll see if this is the week where if they finally get punched and they don't get back up, but
or vice versa. Maybe the Seahawks punch first.
Sure. But, assuming this, maybe the first half, the Niners come out swinging and they do try to really win it in the first quarter. Like you're saying, we've seen this against in almost every game. The Seahawks are not going to just quit, right? So if they can't play a full game and the Seahawks look anything close to competent, then I think the Seahawks will have a really good shot at the end, at least. Because you're not gonna, everything that we've seen from this team, they're not going to quit until the end, right?
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the defense, Jeff, and like how little confidence I think any of us really have. I mean, I'm giving you guys some ways where I think that there's some positives, but it's hard to be confident in this defense based on what we see in the last 2 weeks. But offensively, do you feel like it's as bleak as that?
No. The offense, I really didn't like how Ryan Grubb approached the last game, and I thought he kind of had a college football-y game plan. But the only thing that obviously terrifies me if they get behind and then you have Nick Bosa rushing against Stone Forsythe, what happens with backups, and we've seen this now, Gardner Minshew, it's the same things happen at Forsythe. You give them a big sample size, and they tend to get exposed pretty badly. And he gave up 15 pressures to Aiden Hutchinson. And last week he had a 33 grade, and that matchup is terrifying. But if they can just not get behind, let them obviously pass rush, there's a lot of matchups they can exploit here, and especially with Charvarius Ward banged up. He might not even play. He's questionable. He might be on the IR. There's still a lot that they do well offensively. So they had some issues last week with protection. Dexter Lawrence was just they don't have Dexter Lawrence. And Dexter Lawrence just blew up so many of their plays, and then PFF gives them the 72 grade or something. So I think there's just a lot with Gino and those weapons and the tight ends and the play action, assuming they actually decide to use play action this week, which has not been a strength of Ryan Grubb and something we'd like to see a little bit. But yeah, there's a ton of things on offense they should be able to do. So, Brian, you were asking for 2 of our advantages. I don't know if you have another one, but if DK can go up against an injured Charvarius Ward, or they don't have him, and it's a backup, there are going to be shots to take here, and I think that's a big opportunity for them.
Yeah, I mean, the 49ers are putting out one of the worst safety rooms in the NFL right now. It might be the worst safety room depending on what you're looking at. Their linebacker core, Fred Warner is he's like the sun. He's so bright that people forget that there's basically a black hole next to him. Devondre Campbell is sucking all the light out of the world. He is awful out there in coverage, in run defense. You isolate Kenneth. When people talk about Kenneth Walker in terms of running, You get him isolated on these safeties and on and Devondre Campbell. The 49ers have given up a ton of yards after catch. They are one of the worst teams in the NFL in missed tackles. Unfortunately, so are the Seahawks. But just going to stick with the reality that the 49ers, their run defense in general has been so bad that in this last game against Arizona, they only had 2 players who had run defense grades over 50 and only 1 player who was over 60. Both of those players are cornerbacks. So this has been a really poor defense in a lot of ways. And there's a reason that the only team that the Rams have beat this year, the only team, is the 49ers. There's a reason that Kyler Murray and the Cardinals, who got blown out by multiple teams, managed to beat the 49ers in San Francisco with one of the worst defenses. Like, legitimately, the Rams and Cardinals defenses are worse than the Seahawks defense. Like, you look at the season, it isn't that close. Now, over the last 2 games, if you want to reduce sample size, but that's playing a funny game, because anyone here would tell me that you got to use all the sample you got and not be selective about which sample you use. And the Rams and the Cardinals are not good defenses, and they both beat the 49ers. So we'll get to picks in a little while. I'm not blind. I'm not coming in here. You heard the opening. I'm not saying the Seahawks should be favorites. I don't think they should be.
Yeah.
But I think this notion that this is a prayer that they win this game, I think that's false. I think it's false. I think they have a significantly higher probability to win this game than they have any other game against the 49ers in the last 3 years.
Oh, I definitely agree with that. And seeing their writers think the game was going to be that close kind of took me by surprise, because I don't know if I'm like a biased 49ers guy, and I'm not saying they are. I'm looking at what just happened and looking at where we can win, and I'm like, oh, we're going to blow the doors off them. And then seeing like David Lombardi, who's like Mr. 49er, the guy, only choose a 3-point game, that shook me. Like, I was like, am I missing something here? So he's usually, Josh watches his streams, and he just tells me, he just rips into these other teams apparently. So I'm shocked that their writers are not just expecting a blowout. I've been really shook by that, because I know how I felt. I felt like, oh, this is going to be bad. And then I saw that stat from Griff today, and that kind of lined up exactly where my head's been all week. It's like, we're bad at linebacker going up against Kyle Shanahan. It's not great, but
it's not.
I know their EPA is really high, but they haven't been attacking those areas of the field as much. They've been way more down the field, and it's not like the typical Niners offense you've seen, because they don't. And it's so weird there. Like, they have like all these all-pro guys, and all of a sudden McCaffrey's out, and I hear George Kittle, and I hear the media is like, well, they don't have Christian McCaffrey, like one of their 7 all-pros. They can't function now. It's like, so you can only function when you have 7 all-pro players. I don't know. I know I'm the one crying about injuries all the time, so people are like, Jeff, shut up. But I don't know. I find that a little odd, because they were pretty good before they got McCaffrey, and they made the Super Bowl with Raheem Mostert running back. And now Jordan Mason's good, but they can't function because they don't have their 7th all-pro at a position that doesn't seem to matter. But it seems to be their excuse for everything. I don't know. It's odd to me.
I'll tell you a couple intangibles that at least have my attention. I could name a bunch about the 49ers, but I'm taking the position in this pod of not giving the 49ers that many more things to be, advantaged with, because everyone can think of those things. But Gino Smith said something earlier this year in a press conference that led me to believe he knows his record against the 49ers. He knows what that means to his legacy and reputation in the league. Gino Smith has the potential to break a lot of narratives in this game. And I don't think it's out of the question that Gino Smith comes out and plays a fantastic football game, just like he did, Monday night in Detroit. DK Metcalf, a year ago, found that this coach intentionally requested people to try to provoke him with cheap shots. And he ended up getting a flag for it. It was a huge issue in that locker room that they worked through. It created a lot of dust up. He didn't get any more personal fouls after that, for what it's worth, despite all the things that happened in the media. Charvarius Ward, knee injury, is going to try to fight through it and play in this game, from what I understand. DK Metcalf is a different player this year than he was last year. And I think those are two situations that I wouldn't underestimate in terms of how those two players that are very linked in this game could show up and show out. And if they do, it's going to be a problem for the 49ers. It's going to be a big problem because they don't have an answer. They don't have a safety to help. They don't have a corner. If Ward can't do it, they don't have a corner that can. And it's going to mean a lot of other guys are then going to get open, and it's going to open a lot for Ryan Grubb and for the for the Seahawks. The last intangible for me is what I started with at the beginning, which is while the 49ers are just coming into this game like we just need to be us, the 49ers don't know exactly what they're going to get from the Seahawks on offense or on defense. And that could mean crap. It could mean that it keeps them off balance enough to give the Seahawks the ledge, the footing that they need to get into it. So those are three kind of like light intangibles that are on mind for me. Nathan, we should get into Patreon questions here in a sec. Curious for you as you start to pull those up. How big of a deal is this game for Gino Smith? Just isolating on him.
I don't think it's as big a deal as it feels like, and I don't think it's as big as a deal as people will make it out to be. I mean, he's still got 2 years, right, under contract. He's got another game this year against them, and I don't know, like if he comes out and bombs, sure, like that's not a good sign for him. But if the game goes anything like the games the last couple of weeks have gone, he won't be the one to complain about. There will be some people who will, because there's some people that just hate Gino. Fine, but like I don't think the pressure is on Gino really, at least in terms of like, what does this team need to fix to get right? It's not about Gino. It's about the offensive line. It's about the defense. It's all the stuff that we talked about. So if he loses again, if he has a mediocre game, like that's not going to mean a lot to me. And I don't think it means a lot in the grand scheme of the season or what it means for him to be able to get paid when it comes to that or anything like that. There's lots left on, the schedule, and there's just a lot of time left for him to rectify whatever happens tomorrow, barring that it's not something just completely, some nuclear meltdown.
All right. Nathan's going to pull up the Patreon questions. If you haven't already signed up at patreon.com/hawkblogger, please do. It'd be great to have you. The conversation continues there 24/7, even when we're not doing the show. And every week you get to ask us questions in the Slack channel. So sign up. It's a great place. You also get access to all the audio versions of Hawk Blogger Mornings and everything else. So a lot of good stuff, a lot of great ways to get additional value beyond just the live show. What do we got, Nathan?
Hawks fan Matt Man has this is a really interesting question, actually. It'd be good to get kind of both of you guys' takes on this, maybe. Are we being unfair to Macdonald by projecting our frustrations with Pete onto him? A lot of the team's issues feel the same, but it's also still a lot of the same players. Do we need to give Mike a chance to populate the team with more of his guys? I guess, Jeff, I'll start with you. Do you think that's fair? Do you think that there's a lot of leftover frustration from the last regime that's kind of bubbling over with this team today?
With certain parts of the fan base, absolutely. Other parts of the fan base have just been waiting for this, and they're sharpening their knives right now. But yeah, and I think if you really want to point those blames somewhere, it should be Schneider, because he's the one constant here. And if you want to take issue with the linebackers or the guard position, blaming Macdonald when the coaching staff's changed and the constant stayed the same, I think that's a much better, but I think absolutely the case. And listen, I said all offseason, this is going to take time. I'm not looking at wins and losses. I want to see how it looks by the end of the year. And then all of a sudden we went 3-0 and the Rams became a pumpkin. And I'm like, okay, we're going to win this division. And I expected it. So, yeah, I was frustrated too. But yeah, I think that's totally part of what's going on. I think seeing the same issues persist and everyone's like, well, we have this defensive mastermind and everything looks the exact same. What's going on? Like, does this guy just suck? I had some guy call the coaching staff a joke to me. It was like a Toronto radio host. And I'm like, guys, it's been 5 games. He's had one draft of his own guys. Like, it's going to take time, but obviously it's been a lot worse. The last game was just so bad. I guess everyone just kind of went to these conclusions, but yeah, I absolutely think that's happening. I think the context has been a big part of it. And I think if you're going to blame anyone, I think the personnel issues are really where you would start there. And there's the linebacker spot you could look at. There's the guard spot you could look at. I don't think Macdonald is the one pulling those strings. He didn't even go to the combine. So, yeah, I think that's a little wrong. And I think this guy needs more time. I'm really looking at that Atlanta game really is like, that's a big measuring stick thing for me so we'll see what happens tomorrow, but I don't know if you guys feel differently. That's where I come.
Who's the coach for the best Seahawks defense in franchise history?
Pete.
Mike Holmgren.
Come on. Pete Carroll. What were his defense's ranks in his first year as a head coach? Yards and points allowed.
It had to be terrible. There was a game where I think they lost 41-7 to the Giants, and they just got like punked. And it took him really a year and a half to get his 2 drafts, and really didn't take off till the second half of the second year.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's exactly the same situation. So everyone calm down and chat. Whoever's probably freaking out, I'm not looking, but they were 25th in points allowed and 27th in yards allowed in the first year. Mike Holmgren, one of the best offensive coaches to ever coach in the NFL, period. His first season with the Seahawks, 12th in points scored, so pretty good there, 23 in yards on offense. So those are 2 of Hall of Fame level coaches who were known for one side of the ball. And yeah, it generally does take time. That said, I'm not out on this defense being a top 10 defense this year. I know that I am probably on a total island in that regard, but I'm not. I think the pieces are there. I think there are aspects of this that are not working well right now, and I think it's going to take some time and some actual practice. I think people are overreacting to a period of time where there's literally no practice going on between the Lions game and this 49ers game. There will have maybe been 90 minutes of on-field practice that isn't a walkthrough because they're preserving bodies just to be able to play 3 games in 11 days. They've got excellent outcome from their edge rushers. They will get Byron Murphy back. They will get healthier. They will get Reek Woolen back. I think that there's a lot to come from this defense. And so, yes, I think it's very reasonable to expect it takes some time. I think there's set your expectations at that and then be happy when it actually is better this year than you expect it to be.
Yeah, boy, top 10 defense. Just, I don't know that they're going to have the consistency throughout the year for that. But anyways,
We'll find out.
We will find out. Braxton wants to know, with the NFL coming out and saying the special teams play by the Giants on the blocked kick was legal, how do you see this affecting field goal attempts in the future? Was this a one-off, or will teams abuse this loophole for the rest of the year? Jeff, do you think is this the new tush push? Everybody going to try to copy this?
No, I don't think so. If you really look at the play, some of the things Seattle did were very preventable. And Belichick had it on his show this week and was kind of laughing about how badly Seattle was set up. They had like a cornerback in the A gap, and their guards went immediately to the ground. So I think I think they're going to spend a lot of time coaching that play. I think every special teams room in the league is going to show film of that play this week and figure out a strategy around it. So I don't see it as a tush push. And frankly, the tush push only really worked for the Eagles. Once other teams started trying it, their numbers were not really good because they didn't have Jason Kelsey and Jalen Hurts. So, no, I think this is a pretty preventable situation. And there's also not a lot of freak shows like Isaiah Simmons that could just jump over a dude like he can. Literally, I think that was his only snap of the game. And so I think they just caught Seattle at the worst possible moment with their pants down. And frankly, as Belichick said, they got what they deserved.
Brutal. Brian, Brendan wants to know, what are your thoughts on the seeming lack of creativity from Ryan Grubb in the run game? Seemed to be a strength of his in college, but the offensive looks have been pretty bland most of the time.
Yeah, it's been confusing to me. That was one of the things I was most excited about him coming here for. And he talked about the run all offseason, and DK Metcalf said that was the first thing that he said to the team. And I don't know, man. I think some of it is Kenneth Walker was out for a few games, and I think that he really sees Kenneth Walker as a very, very different player than Zach Charbonnet. Some of it's just been him getting off game script. Some of it's been the way the defense has put them in situations where they've had to get off game script. So I think it'll come. We know it's in there. We saw bits of it against the Lions, but we need to see more. No doubt about it.
Man, Ryan Grubb is setting back the never run effort years by actually never running, and people have now like galaxy brained themselves into thinking that it's the solution. Jeff, Troy Fagan wants to know, Byron Murphy getting doubled is good. Wants to know, how worried are you about the edge rusher rotation going into tomorrow?
Well, I was a lot more relieved when I heard that Mafe and Hall are likely to play. That had scary levels. The Nwosu thing is such a bummer. They really miss him. He's probably the most well-rounded run edge setter. And just behind those guys, Draymond Jones has not done a lot to verify all that coaching excitement from the new staff. He's been kind of crap since that Miami game, and really was when the other guys went out, he's been invisible. And so Gibson looked awful in that Detroit game, and I don't know if Sheriff's going to get called up for tomorrow or he's going to get activated once Nwosu goes on the IR, but I've been very vocal about, I think there's a reason Sheriff's not even dressing this year, and he's a preseason dude. So I don't know the state of Hall and Mafe to know, because I was excited about Leonard Williams coming back, and then when I watched the game, he looked like he shouldn't have been out there. I heard some comments from Schneider before the game that he was questionable. Really, he kind of pushed the play and probably shouldn't have played in hindsight. He looked pretty brutal. And again, it's hard to say. I don't know those two guys' health. I don't know their situation, but they've really missed Boye and Mafe. And one of the reasons they have is because really what pissed me off so much about that Giants game, and this is Mafe's best skill, is they don't really have any disruptors when those guys are out. Like, no one was disrupting any of their pass plays at all. And Boye was doing that really well. He was a top 10 guy in the league in pressure rate. So was Leonard Williams. So is Murphy. Murphy's a disruptor. So if you take out those disruptors against this defense where they can just toy with guys and Purdy can play well, it lends for a pretty ugly spot. It happened. That was the big thing in the Giants game. They could not disrupt the run play. They could not disrupt the pass play. And yeah, people are going to cling to like, maybe they should have kept Darrell Taylor. Yeah, obviously I'd rather have him than Gibson, but I think that was more of a Macdonald setting the program. But if you just look at pure personnel, I think they're kind of regretting that one a little bit. But so I don't know. I don't have a great answer on that. I don't know those two guys' health. If they're healthy, I feel a lot better. If they're not, if it's like Leonard last week, yikes.
Darrell Taylor's like top 5 in pass rush win rate or something like that. It's
played well, man.
Kind of nuts. Amani Waddell wants to know, for the scale of 1 to 10, the impact of this game's outcome on the season for both teams. I think we talked about this with the Niners, right? Like, they get into a pretty rough spot if they lose this game. Brian, what does it mean for the Seahawks the rest of the year if they lose tomorrow?
I mean, I said it in the post-game show, and I stand by it. I think your aspirations for the season, like, you hope to find a way into the playoffs. Like, that's your kind of upside at that point, and you're going to need help. You'll be 0-3 in the NFC. You're going to be losing a lot of tiebreakers. You're going to have lost your first home game against the division, your toughest probably team in the division. You're going to need a lot to go well. It is not as bleak as it would be for the 49ers. And so going 0-3 in your division, when you have Super Bowl aspirations, and you're probably going to go to 2-5 if you lose then to the Chiefs in Kansas City the next week, it'd be tough. But it doesn't get that much easier for the Seahawks after this game. They got to go to Atlanta, and then they've got to be home against Buffalo. You could easily be looking at a 5-game losing streak, right? So it gets real fast here. And so I think the team that wins this game probably wins the division. And I think that I stand by that with the Seahawks winning as well as if the 49ers do.
And I'll go to you on this one as well, Brian. I'm curious what you think on this one. Larry O'Keefe wants to know, I've been wondering if some of the defensive difficulties could potentially be attributed to Mike's head coaching time commitments cutting into his defensive coordinator prep time. Is Mike distracted? Does he need to give up play calling duties to Ride and Dirty?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure it has some factor, but if Mike was spending 20% more time on the defense, would Jerome Baker have been healthier and on the field more often? Would Tyrell Dodson have been picking the right gaps, which he already was coached to do the proper way? Would Uchenna Nwosu have been healthy? Would Byron Murphy have been healthy? Would Leonard Williams have been healthy? Would have, on and on and on. I think there's a lot of reasons for the challenges on defense that have nothing to do with Mike Macdonald, period.
Jeff, Jess has a really interesting point here, and I'm surprised that this hasn't come up more, or maybe it has and I just haven't really caught it. But Macdonald handled the Niners last year. The Ravens throttled the Niners last year. Why will it or why won't it happen again this year? We're so concerned about the schematic, matchup here with the Shanny offense and the linebackers, but certainly, I mean, there's no Roquan Smith, but it wasn't a problem last year.
Yeah, the problem is some of the players that cause a lot of those disruptions right now were just, again, I talked about it before, there's disruptors, and you need those guys, and Kyle Hamilton as a chess piece and what he was able to do, and Clowney and how they can. And I was talking to Griff this week, and I was kind of asking him in DM, I'm like, why does it look so different? And me and Griff don't always see players on eye to eye, but he really helps me kind of understand the X's and O's stuff, because it's not my strength. And he said, when your fundamentals are so bad, you can't disguise anything, because it's not going to, you have to just do the base level things. So what they did so well is disguise things, and they had Clowney's length and Roquan side to side speed and Hamilton. We kind of expected Witherspoon to be that chess piece, and because of their other issues, Witherspoon's almost been negated, and people are unfairly blaming him. Why isn't this guy flashing? But people aren't really throwing at him. He's kind of been negated based on what's happening around him. And when everything's working and they have the right pieces, like they did in Baltimore with Matabuke and all that, that's when the scheme really takes off. And even in Baltimore with the same players, they look much worse without Macdonald. So Purdy admitted they're running the same scheme. In Seattle, it's just obviously looks a lot different right now to our eyes. And listen, when the guys get healthy and they learn the scheme and they learn what they're supposed to do, and that's when you can really get exotic and creative and disguise. And this was a game I'd circled all summer, because I'm I want to see how this looks versus how Pete looked against Shanahan the last 3 years, which is one of the reasons he's gone. And so, unfortunately, we're not getting that test, in my opinion, because they're not close to full strength. And some of the other issues that have persisted, I think that maybe the second game we'll see a little more of that. But I think Macdonald knows his team. He's studied these guys. He knows how to attack them. I just don't know if they have the horses right now to do it. Depends what state Murphy and Williams are in. I mean, not Murphy, Maffei and Williams are in. And I think those are the kind of guys that can disrupt. But I don't think they're at the point where they can start disguising things and they can really do what did lead to a lot of those turnovers was just personnel confusion. I thought it would look a little more like that, and frankly hasn't. It's looked a little more. I know, Nathan, you talked about during the game last week. You're they run the same front every time. That's not what we were taught with Mike Macdonald. So this is where I do think it is going to take more time. But yeah, I think they know how to attack this team. I just don't know if they have the connection yet and the players right now.
All right, for both of you, Jason A wants to know, there's 4 games between now and the bye. Niners, Falcons, Bills, and Rams. What is Seattle's record over those next 4 games? Brian?
Falcons, Bills, Rams, and then they get bye after that, right?
Right, so the Niners, Falcons, Bills, Rams, yeah.
And the Rams game is home or away?
They are home, away, home, home.
Yeah.
So just, Falcons
2
away.
and 2.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think 2 and 2. The Bills, like, they look really good on like some of those advanced metric charts, but I've watched their last 2 games. They have a glaring issue with a lack of skill. I don't know if you saw Josh Allen's stats last week. The Texans lost Nico Collins in that game, and they kind of tanked in the middle of the game. The Bills have kind of started to unravel a little bit, and some of the issues that people thought would be about their team have started to come to. And I think they'd actually do match up against Atlanta pretty well because they don't really have the scary edge rusher, and that's a shootout game. So I think those 2 games have a pretty good shot. I really think this is the only game where I'm just not feeling great about their chances. I actually think the next couple games, even with the issues that persist, I think they actually match up really well in almost all those games because Atlanta's not like a great base running team. Like that's not what they're doing. They're spreading it out and throwing. Like I actually think they could handle some of those other games. It's really just this one that I just feel pretty awful about.
Yeah, I think 1 and 3. I'm feeling bad. Right
Mr.
now about
NFC
the
Championship is feeling different.
I don't feel good about that anymore.
It's a long season, man.
I understand.
Yeah.
That's it for on that note, that's it for Patreon questions.
Well, thank you everybody on patreon.com/hawkblogger for doing that. Appreciate the support, and thank you, Nathan, for asking the questions. Look, I said it after the post-game show. I still feel it now. It will feel amazing if the Seahawks find a way to win this game tomorrow. I think I will be, not just because I have, you and I, Nathan, have kind of contrarian feelings at times. Like when people pull one way, we kind of pull the other. We both have that in common in different ways, but I won't feel all the way back to better, even with a win tomorrow. Like, I think I need to see that there's a lot left to prove, and there's a lot left to learn about this team, even if they find a way to win. So everyone's like out on the team. It is very clear how low-mo Seahawks fans are right now about this team. And I get it. But I'm still there. I still see the path. I just it would be nice if they find a way to win this game. There's no doubt about it. There are a few super chats I want to get to before we get into our predictions. Detail-oriented. Just for argument's sake, let's say the Hawks absolutely blow the 49ers out tomorrow. I know. But if we do, does everyone's view of where the Hawks are change any? Can stomping the 49ers change minds? Answer the question, Nathan.
Yes. I mean, that'll make a big difference. I will say, though, that, like, we did just spend a lot of time on why the Niners aren't, like, the Niners.
Are you going to do that?
I probably will. You
asshole.
I probably will. Not that, but, like, also, someone once pointed out that sometimes I can be a little contrarian. You and Evan are going to be so obnoxious if they win this game that, like, just there will be a part of me that's like, go the other way. The Niners are actually bad. It doesn't mean anything. So, yeah, I'll probably need, like, it'll make a huge difference, but I'll probably need to see it again against the Falcons.
Jeff, how about you?
I've said it all year long. I don't care about wins and losses. I think you can tell when a team's legitimate or they're not. And, like, everyone's like, well, if they get 10 wins or they make the playoffs, or I don't care if they make the playoffs. If they win 10 games and they're fraudulent, to me, that's no progress. I don't care. But if they go out and beat the crap out of the Niners and, like, it feels legitimately real, that's what I'm looking for. I want to see signs that something real is being built here, because it feels like it's been forever where I felt that way, other than like those 7 games in 2020 or whatever. But That's all. That's what I want to see. So if they go out and beat the rails off the Niners, that's the step towards what I'm looking for. I want to see that there's something attainable. There's momentum building. The first 3 games looked like it defensively, but it seems like we've been tricked. So again, you could tell at the end of 2011 that something was happening here. They just needed a quarterback. You could tell in 2012 they just needed a pass rusher. They got 2 and they won the Super Bowl. I can usually tell from the eye who's fooling you. Again, they won 9 games last year, and I hated every minute of it. So I don't care if they win the game. I care if I see something real and something sustainable.
Yeah, amen. And to that point, I'm not going to acknowledge this blowing, like routing them. I think the probability of that is so low. I think the 49ers, as much as I can't stand them, I don't see that. I don't see them getting blown out in games unless a lot of really good things happen for you.
If Mike can get some turnovers, if he can get more of those Purdy picks,
turnovers, sure.
and if they can't stop the run,
I think Brock Purdy is just like he's one of those guys that's going to always come back and like I don't know. I don't think that's realistic, but
Purdy's going to throw 3 picks. K9's going to go for 160 years, and they're just going to suffocate the Niners.
I think that sounds great, Nathan. What I was trying to say is I want to see this team literally, like I would like the 49ers to bring their best and for the Seahawks to look like they belong on the field with them. That's what I want to see. That can look a bunch of different ways, but it's been embarrassing to watch the Seahawks go toe-to-toe with the 49ers for the last few years. I don't want it to be embarrassing anymore. I want it to be competitive, even if it ends up in a loss. I want to feel like the Seahawks belong on the field with them. That's what I want to see, and there's a lot of ways that could happen. But, and beyond that, short of that, I want to see that this team plays physically and with a lot of urgency and a lot of energy, like not what we saw against the Giants. I want that out of my head because that was really, really hard to watch. So
the number of times that EQ has come up in the group chat is concerning.
yeah, that's going to continue to be a question for me, but yeah, we'll see. We'll get to predictions here in a second. I want to thank Dr. Morgan for being a member for a month. Says, let's go Hawks, start the climb to glory. Love that. Corey Coleman with a super chat says, how much do the Seahawks run more? 15 to 20 or 20 plus carries between K9 and Charbs? Nathan?
Less. No, I don't know. I don't know that they're going to be able to do it. They're talking a good game and stuff, and like, but the fact is, they don't put themselves in the position to run a lot of the time. False starts, holding, sacks, and now you're 2nd and 12 or 2nd and 15 or 3rd and 9. Like, you're not running. Like, the game just doesn't let you do it, and I don't know why that suddenly changes this week. So I don't think it's going to be as much as people want it to be, but we'll see.
All right, let's get to predictions. Jeff, what's going to happen in this game? What's the final score?
I think I've given away how I feel about this game, so this is no surprise to anyone. I just think that one advantage where Seattle just doesn't defend the run out of too high very well, and the linebackers struggling with just basic reading of gaps, and they keep going. I don't think 3 days without practice is really the best way to go up against Kyle Shanahan. So I just think that's too much of an Achilles heel. I'm going to say 27-17 for the 49ers.
Nathan.
I think this will be a close game. I don't know that we're going to walk away from it feeling that we saw the Niners of old come back and the Seahawks go toe-to-toe with them and they just fell short and, oh man, don't we all feel good even though they lost? I don't know that we're getting that, but I do think it'll be close. I'll go with something really close. I'll say 24-23 Niners.
Yeah, I hate when I look in the paper on game day and I see predictions, and it's usually Matt Calkins. Matt, if you're listening, hello. And he's like always picking the other team, and it always pisses me off. And even if it's a legitimate reason, it bothers me. And so there's people that are tuning in that obviously want to hear us pick the Seahawks to win. And I'm cognizant of that, but I look at this game and I just see a lot more paths to victory for the 49ers. And I see that for the second time in 3 games, the Seahawks are facing a team that I think feels a little bit more urgency, that has a much clearer identity of who they are, and has a talent advantage with their best players still on the field. And so despite the fact I see ways the Seahawks can win this game, I won't be like shocked if they win. I'll be delighted. I believe the 49ers win this game. I think it'll be 27-24 San Francisco. And with that, F the 49ers. I hope.
Is this the first time you've picked the Niners? I feel like you typically have a principle against it.
Yeah,
I do. And I think in this case, I look at this and that's the outcome I expect.
Mike has brought this team so low that you're even picking the Niners now.
So Brian, how are you feeling about Coach of the Year candidate Dan Quinn?
Well, I'll tell you what, Jeff. Have you watched him on the sideline, and do you have any question about his ability to motivate his team on the emotional standpoint?
Yeah, I saw some clips of him today. A little different than our conversation on Sunday.
Yeah. Look, I've always been a Dan Quinn guy, and I'm really happy for Dan Quinn.
Oh, we know.
I know. I'm a Dan Quinn guy, and I think he's a great coach, and I think I'm not surprised by his success, but I'd still rather have Mike Macdonald. I'm happy with who we got. So let's hope. I will be so excited to eat crow tomorrow and for everyone to shove this clip in our faces. I will love it. Bring it on. But let it be known that Real Hawk Talk does not always pick the Seahawks to win, even against the hated 49ers. So we'll be here after the game. It'll take me a while to get home after the game, but I will at least do a post-game show. We'll see if Nathan and Jeff and whoever else has the stomach for it.
If we're allowed on.
Yeah. Yes. There is a rule. Like, I've got to be willing to talk to people, and there's sometimes I'm just not. All right, guys. Well, thank you for coming on. Thanks everyone for sticking with us with the audio issues early. I'm Brian Emhauser. That was Nathan Ernst at Nathan11, Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons. I'm Brian Emhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at HawkBlogger. This has been episode 334 of Real Hawk Talk. Take care, y'all.